All right, everybody. Listen, I'm not even going to hold y'all. We're going to get straight into it, because I want to save all my time for this incredible conversation. Now, we're going to do it like we do it every day. Welcome to Goldenlite Academy's Talk Series. And I'm so excited for everybody watching on YouTube, for my LinkedIn family, people joining from my Instagram family. This is going to be a moment today. So I don't have a long introduction. Of course, we want to send our thoughts and prayers to everyone in our beautiful city of Los Angeles. And I hope that, let me just tell you guys something. I have seen in the last 2 weeks more heart than I've seen in the 20 plus years that I've been in Los Angeles. I mean, it's been absolutely incredible. And thank you to everyone around the world for your prayers. Our city is resilient. We've been here forever. And Altadena holds a really special place in the Black community. And so I'm really excited. We're leading into Black History Month. We have 2 weeks where we have this incredible moment where we are specifically focusing on the needs of Black men in Los Angeles, which is really cool. It's really timely. It's really important. And the goal today is for us to talk about what's happening for Black men. What are some of the concerns around substance use? And that conversation is going to lead into the hearts, the minds, and the souls of people all over the world, because you'll be able to see your own intersections, your own selves through our stories. Now, what's interesting to me is that people have these ideas about what Los Angeles is. And like I said, I've lived here for 23 years. And if you grow up here, if you're from here, you understand that LA is very unique. When we go other places in the world, we realize that there's a mix of both Hollywood and hood and everything that's in between. And so then we have this rich culture where we can go from South Central, from Watts, and we can drive up to Beverly Hills. We can, my church is in Beverly Hills, and we have places by USC and by the beach, and all the way up through the east side of LA and the valley. We have this richness, this diversity within our community. And so, what does that mean when you're a Black man in this space? It means that we're very unique. We have a history that is related to our experiences. My mentor has done like historical work of documenting what happens in Los Angeles. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to bring on somebody who's absolutely incredible, who works very closely with the mission and the vision that not only I have for this world, but that our ventures do, whether it's the work that we've done at TTC College or the work at Golden Global Enterprises. For those who don't know, Golden Global is rooted in emotional resilience. We are rooted in fundamental servant leadership and transformative healing for underserved communities. So, of course, we're going to be doing something like this today. And so I'm done talking. I want to get us started. We're going to go ahead and get cracking with this video because I know y'all love it. And we'll be back. All right, everybody. A couple things before Justin jumps on. Realize that if you are on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, you can throw questions into the chat, you can throw comments into the chat, and we'll make sure that we integrate those as we go. Now, let me introduce Justin. Justin is a incredible force of light and energy in our community in Los Angeles. I have watched this brother for the last few years support all people, but the work that he does with Black men in Los Angeles is bar none. I consider him a very, very close friend of mine, but also somebody who I have seen genuinely impact Black men in this community through his storytelling, through his advocacy, and through what he does every single day at work. He is a certified counselor. He works with people who are detoxing from drugs and alcohol. And he also promotes harm reduction as a theory. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when he comes on. I recently got to see Justin speak at a local homeless shelter, and I was really intrigued by the way that he was able to take his story and literally turn it into a Baptist sermon that was inspiring people to heal, to be able to see themselves in him and his story. You know, for him to talk about what he's been through, what his path has been, and then to just show up and say, "Hey guys, if I can do this, you can do it." To see him tell people, I'll pick you up and take you to a 12-step meeting. You know, to have him connect men in this community with other men who look like them that can help them heal has been incredible. I think that Justin, I've seen him make authentic connections with what I call them mom and pop organizations. There's a lot of organizations in LA that they help the community, but they're not well known. These are places that I think of like TDD out in South Central or Gift of Life. I see Justin seek these places out and then go and speak and run groups and give services. And I think we need more of that. And so that's what we're talking about today. So let me go ahead and bring in Justin. We'll be giving him that virtual hand clap. And for those watching and those who will watch us, you are looking at a force of nature. So, Justin, welcome to Goldenlite Academy Talk Series. And how incredible is it? You were a part of some of those early conversations when I was like, I want to do this. And, we're here today.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. It's always an honor to be in the presence of you and in any enterprise that you're working on. I know that your spirit is genuine, and we are in the business of helping people. And so, however I can kind of invest in that, you have me right. I'm committed to. Yeah,
Oh,
what a beautiful thing, right? To be able to work with. I always say it's not me that's actually doing the work. I believe in a higher power, and I call that God, right? I'm too stupid to call it anything else, right? It's too big for me to actually like call it anything else but God. So I'm glad just to be a tool in helping these individuals that have probably suffered through some of the things I've suffered through, and actually for our culture, moving forward and healing through some of the things that we go through on a regular day basis.
now listen, we're gonna do it like we do every day. I decided to wear my puff coat today. I was gonna put on my chains, but I was like, we're talking about LA, we're talking about hip hop, we're talking about Hollywood. So let me put on my puff coat and be out here. I know we're not in New York, but y'all know what time it is when the black puff coat comes on. So I'm excited to get into some of these topics with you. And while this is a difficult subject, it's something that we talk about every day almost in the work that we do, because we spend so much time with people who are in need. And how many times have you literally gotten a call from me to say, "Hey, I just heard from a brother on the street that needs services," and then we just kind of wrap our arms around them. We will meet them where they're at. We've had. I remember a story where I got a call and it was a dear somebody who's really really important to me, and they said, "Listen, my family member is struggling. Black male, great job, great personality, but has an alcohol problem, and I don't know what to do." And what do I do? What do you do? We got you. We'll take care of it, and did. I think that that is the power of brothers healing brothers and healing brothers in Los Angeles, and we need more of that. So let's talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I mean that's what we do. Like I said, we're into healing people, and when anytime called, we answer, right, and we meet them exactly where they're at. For me, having a shared experience with substances and being obviously a brother, I've been disproportionately serviced within our own community and kind of marginalized due to some of the things that being justice impacted and so forth. I like to rise to the action, right? If called upon, how I see it is God is utilizing me. And so that was a great story, right? That's a real authentic story, and it's very real and dear to my heart. Being able to get on the phone and talk to somebody that's actually actively suffering. It's a great part of the job and a great part of my life. It's a lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
So I
certainly,
so I
certainly, certainly.
so like a lot of these stories you talk about, we have great backstories, success stories due to those moments that you brought us in. That person is now living uh, within the community and thriving career wise, and it's just been an awesome kind of journey to be part of his journey, right?
Yeah.
At the same
Well,
time.
what I've thought about in the last few years, especially with some of the work that we've done at TTC College, is representation matters. And I'm a black man. I've been a black man for 40 years, and I know what my brothers go through because I hear it all the time. It's the community that I'm a part of, but I also realize that within all different types of communities, people need people who look like them, who speak the same languages, who have a cultural connection to support them as well. It's really important to what we do. Now, Los Angeles in particular is a specific area. This is not your random city in California or in the world. And some of the things I think about, what was my first introduction to Los Angeles? It was a little John Singleton film called Boys in the Hood.
Come on,
And
come
I
on.
think for a lot of people, this was their introduction to Los Angeles and uh, who we are and what we do. Now, this is the thing: Boys in the Hood isn't representative of the entire black male experience in Los Angeles. Not everybody grew up in South Central Compton Watts. Not everybody, has a background where they understand what it's like to live in the projects. Not everybody was in a gang, but do you think that there's a big part of this culture that relates to what John Singleton was talking about when it comes to gangs or even menace to society? Um, the words of Nipsey, the words of Pac. We were just talking about, Brenda's Got a Baby. We were talking about Keep Your Head Up, Cube, NWA. I was trying not to say Snoop today, but you know, how does that relate to us as black men? And it makes us kind of like unique in LA.
Well, I definitely think it has sentiments of some of the experiences that we face through some of the more challenging topics. The Black experience as a whole is its own unique demographic. Let's just say this: the elephant in the room through policies and laws and just everyday life, racism and segregation it plays a major role, right?
Out here. And you saw that,
Definitely,
we saw
definitely.
that certainly in LA with the Rodney King incidents. I mean, we saw it all the way back to the Watts revolts in the 60s. I mean,
Right,
the relationship between blackness, black men, and the larger judicial system
right.
has been really difficult, and so that's historical, and it's something that we can't escape, even if we don't come from the hood, or even if we do have money, or we don't fit those stereotypes. We also fall victim to that.
Yeah, you bring up some poignant revelations about the community as a whole. I mean, from the stigmatization, I can't even speak today, cultural perceptions, access to care, racism, underrepresentation in the mental health, historical trauma. You know, you can't fit that all in one film, right? And so when you talk about these experiences that we see different perceptions of, like either you take Boys in the Hood, you take the gang quality, which is a big thing in Los Angeles. It's one of the elephants in the room that haven't really been exposed as it relates to treatment and substance abuse and mental health, and the trauma that is kind of indicative of that particular subject. And you know, from where it started and where it has evolved. And then you take all these different, so there's so many complexities around our culture that have to be really understood to actually identify and then start to heal from. So, you know,
Yeah.
that's what comes with the culture.
And you know
And
that
disconnect.
makes me think when you're talking about that, Justin, it takes me back to the 80s and early 90s in particular. And we talk a lot about this in the work that we do, but it is the crack epidemic and how that was so disproportionately negative for Black Americans in particular, both Black and brown. But I remember in the Black community, we literally saw Nancy Reagan, we saw George Bush, get on TV and hold up a bag of crack and say, you know, people who use this are the most dangerous people in America. And it creates this idea that if you're a user of substances, specifically crack, which we know was dropped off in Black and brown communities anyways, but I'm gonna leave that there because I don't want to get canceled. But you know, we understand that those ideas that were implanted into our minds on national TV then created people's understanding of what it means to be a person of color, a Black person who uses drugs. And so now we're seeing in this like really a negative light. We're seeing not as people who are suffering from a medical disorder, but now we're like the main issue in the country, which is exactly what they were telling us. Tupac, you know, he even the brilliance of Tupac. There's a lot of stuff that's brilliant about him. I miss teaching about him. I used to teach him in the sixth grade, and you know, give the crack to the kids. No one else cares. You know, one less hungry mouth on the welfare. You know, I think that he was really talking about how easy it is for us to end up on substances. You know, how it's become such a big part of our experience, and not because we were like, well, let's wake up and do some crack today, but because there's all these factors that lead to Black men, Black people using substances. And it's really hard to be on the receiving end of the backlash when there's a lot of reasons why we end up on substances in the first place.
Well, I mean, a few of them would be historical trauma, coping mechanisms that weren't really introduced at the time, and then you have the family dynamics, right? With mass incarceration goes less fathers in the household. I think I read a article talking about 17 million kids go fatherless without any adoptive parents, stepfathers, or actually biological fathers. And so that's enough to actually fill New York and Los Angeles together, four times
Yeah.
over in Los Angeles. So when you realize that that is a direct response, or it's a derivative of what we see today, where people have sought out gangs for validation and representation. And you kind of see this mass incarceration, kind of this grandiose idea of gangs and that lifestyle, and what it happens is that recidivism rate increase. Then you can kind of understand why substance abuse is probably one of the hallmarks of today's epidemics. It's just
Yeah.
complex trauma at its greatest.
And why we use substances, I think, is complex in and of itself. You know, so it's kind of like a cycle. You know, people blame the person who uses substances, but there's a lack of support for people who use substances that look like us. And so it becomes this cycle because then we feel the stigma associated to, well, you know, I have an addiction, or I need to get help, but I'm either scared to go into treatment because I don't want to be labeled a certain way, or I don't know how I'm going to be treated when I get into treatment. So I'm going to, you know, continue to use, or sometimes I'm using because of societal issues, because of family issues that were created for me. And it just becomes this big cycle. I wish I had my whiteboard so I could draw it up there. But
Yeah,
that is an issue. Now, our relationship as Black men with drugs is directly tied into our issues with the prison system. And
right.
we live in California, where Black men make up 28% of prisoners, and Black women make up 23% of prisoners.
Right.
But we are just 6% of the state's population.
Yes.
I
Yes.
need somebody to help me understand how that makes sense from a historical level, from just your general 1 plus 1 is 2. If we have 28% of our prison system in California filled with Black men, but we only make up 6% of the population, that's a problem already in and of itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which brings up the point: if you take away the fathers and you leave a single parent household, the single parent household has to work more, and which leaves you with what they call latchkey kids, right? And so they're left for guidance to their own devices, right? And if that's the case, then we know why we can't really talk about so many Dr. Goldens, but all we have is to highlight are these movies, rappers, and actors to kind of simulate what it is to be an adult, right? And then once we left our own vices, there's a maladaptive behavior that's included into these subsects like gangs and so forth and so on. And so the recidivism increases, right? The maladaptive behaviors turn into crimes, and crimes turn into jail. And the system, it kind of repeats itself, right? You have a lot of broken homes, and a lot of the values that were once established within the two-parent home is now kind of diminished through socioeconomic factors that have played a major role in family dynamics, right? And so it's a major talking point. How do we get from simulating what's on TV or what we hear through the radio, a lot of it being endorsing these maladaptive behaviors, right? And so it's really kind of sad to see our community being stricken with the amount of trauma that we really, some for some reason have endorsed
Yeah.
and idolized for so long. And so we're reaping the repercussions of that.
Well, post traumatic slave disorder is real. We've been through a lot
Right.
over the last 400 years in this country. And I think that there's a big willingness and desire to heal. There's a lot of systems that are really difficult for us to work through. I spent the early part of my career, I spent 11 years working with Black and Brown, primarily youth, who were in the juvenile justice system all over LA. And, you know, gangs, drug issues, family issues, lack of education access, lack of mental health treatment access. Um, these are regular people. These are not criminals. These are not people who need to be locked away, who are a danger to society.
Right.
These are youth who look like us, who have had a difficult growing up,
Right.
and they get thrown into this system. And then 20 years later, when you start to see that they keep cycling through for different reasons, then they get blamed for, you know, like
Right.
how violent we are, how much of criminals we are, and they carry this trauma. I have boys who are breaking down crying. because they're like, I'm just a little kid. Like, I've had to be out here trying to take care of myself. And the code of the streets is what, makes me need to fall in line, I need to blend in. It's startling for me, but it also, now working with adults, I see a continuum. I see that the adults today were those little kids. I see that the black men who are grown up today were those little boys that I was working with. And some of them were able to get rehabilitated early, and they didn't have to, deal with the same issues with recidivism. But a lot of them ended up going through a cycle of going to rehab, of going to jail, of getting put on the streets, of going back to rehab, of going back to jail, of getting put on the streets, of going back to rehab, of going back to jail, of going to the streets.
Right. Well, it's really hard to reimagine yourself, right? You know, I talk about this recidivism, and it's important to kind of factor in that, like, it only is recidivism because people can't reimagine themselves outside of their thinking, right? And so if I've only been idolizing the Tupacs, the Bluefaces, all these being established characters, and not really getting to know the innocents and the Shakurs of the actual people that are illustrating these behaviors, it's a cycle, right? And so, like, like I always say, we can pump them with hope, but if we don't get through the barriers, then we've lost the fight altogether, you know?
It's I feel like black men need compassion. When I start to think about what's going on, I think that black men need compassion. You good, Justin? Okay. I think that
Yeah, I had to make an adjustment.
I okay, we need compassion. We need to be thought of, not as society's problem, but how can we lift up these guys who have been through so much? And I think in LA, it's really, really, really needed. Now, now you talked about Blueface, and Blueface is my homie, so I want to let that be known. But and we're going to talk about him in a second. Jail and prison in California is very hard. My mom worked in lockdown prisons, the most dangerous prisons in the state: Soledad, Salinas Valley. I remember the stories that she used to tell. And one of the things I think that's important is that we have a large amount of black men who are in jails and prisons. How are they being treated while they're in there? And is that going to help them when they get released? And a lot of them have to go into substance use treatment because it's a lot of times a part of our experiences with the justice system. What is it like for black men, while they're inside the jails and prisons, that like, what's going on with that?
Well, to give you a little backstory, I've actually been incarcerated myself, from local jails to penitentiaries, and I can tell you this is that they have cultivated this idea. First of all, the understanding of gangs is a necessity to understand where we've gone and where we are today. We've come a long ways from the movie Colors. You know?
Okay, people don't know about colors.
We've come a long
Man,
ways from that where the black
you
and
just
brown were
aged
seen
yourself.
together.
You
Right,
aged
right,
yourself with it.
right.
I try to stay meant for society, but
Well, we've come a long ways, right? From the brown berets, from the community revolution and progress, which is Crips, building legions of organized development, which is Bloods, right? Protect, observe, and serve, which is the catalyst for brown berets. So we've kind of catapulted in the prison system, where everybody eventually happens when you have this maladaptive behavior. And at that time, it's more a revolutionary segment, right? People were revolting against a system that was oppressing them at the time. And so they had more structure, as you could say, and there was a lot of more resources that were catering to the community, catering to the people.
From
but
us though, right? Like this is from our own
yes,
communities.
right.
So
And
this is the
so,
breakfast programs from the Black Panthers. This is
right, come
National
on,
Action Network. You know, like
come on,
okay,
right. And so,
Operation Breadbasket.
right, we were facilitating uh, needed support for our own communities, and we found it necessary to have these organizations so we could help our community, give back to our community, and it was from the police brutality and so forth and so forth. So on. The reason I think that it's necessary to kind of um, uh, is a poignant topic is because where we are today is far from. Um, when colors was established, there was black and brown kind of together. Even though we had our own subsects, we were still together. The prison kind of uh, evolution, if you would, has turned completely segregated. So to your point of asking of what it's like today, black and brown are not as coagulated. We may
United.
be in the same united. We might be in the same area, but it is we definitely polarized due to race, and that breeds a whole different ideology. And as a black man, one of the elephants in the room is that almost everybody is against us, right? Where you would have the whites and the Hispanics, politic on one side of the room, and then having the black community and the others, which is the
Mm,
Asian. And so when you have that polarization, the sad part is, and it's kind of something we touched on before, is that we look up only to the blue faces and the Tupacs, and we don't have a lot of other people other than sports. The Jordans, the Kobe's, so forth and so on. We don't have a lot of people to look up to. So when our superheroes come out of jail, they have this idea. They have adopted this new way of living for survival techniques because it's been segregated out there. They bring that same kind of consciousness out here. And so what happens is, though, they return to the same areas, and then they spread the message of what it was like for in there. And so you have these little kids that are seeing this and idolizing this and adapting to this new way of life, right? And so what happens is that same segregation that's happened out there kind of gets spilled onto our streets, and those people go on to do certain things, and it just is kind of like
interesting.
a real sad festering epidemic within Los Angeles. Los Angeles is known to be the gangbang capital of the world. I think
Yeah.
there's over 120,000 gang members in Los Angeles.
Now
Uh,
Chicago might try to fight you on that, and New York might try to fight, and maybe Brazil. But you're right. Like this is
right,
it. Gang culture is very synonymous with Los Angeles, and we're not just known for it through the movies and TVs, but I live in South LA, and you can drive down one street and you'll hit several different hoods on that
right,
same street. So it's very unique. And the thing, I think that one of the things I've learned is the judgments that come for brothers who are in gangs is very similar to the judgment that I see for brothers who use substances, where people don't understand them and they think that they're just these violent, these are regular people. These are homies of ours. These are family members. These are, people who I see at the grocery store who are looking out for the community. And I think that we all need to start to shift our understanding of Black men in these spaces. These are us, like we're all one as a human race. Like we are all one, and so we need to be able to see our brothers as that way. Now, you brought up Blueface. Okay, I have a lot to say. I'm not going to get canceled today.
yeah,
Blueface, it's interesting. We've watched, and he's become this big superstar over the last few years. This is an LA native, and this is somebody who is very talented and has this very far reach within in the world. You can pretty much go anywhere in the country, especially in the black community. Everybody knows who Blueface and Krishan are. And what he represents to me is this idea that it's not just about where you live and how much money you have, that substance use can impact black men in Los Angeles of all demographics. Blueface does not live in Watts.
Right.
Okay. Blueface is not in the projects. Blueface lives in Tarzana, in a affluent area of Los Angeles. Blueface is a millionaire,
Yeah.
but he deals with a lot of the same struggles that our brothers do in other parts of Los Angeles. And it's not just Blueface, there's a whole demographic of Hollywood and entertainment where drugs have become really difficult to manage, and not on some blame stuff, but on some, I've seen Chris Brown struggle for decades with
Right.
substance use. And this is one of our most talented entertainers. You know, we've watched our brothers die of overdoses. We were talking about Juice World earlier.
Right.
I was talking about Prince,
Right.
who unnecessarily died of an overdose, accidental poisoning. um, it doesn't discriminate. Substance use
No.
does not discriminate in our community, and it doesn't matter how much money you have. But what are your thoughts about some of these like high profile or Hollywood elite or in between? Because it's not, LA for black men is not just polarized. It's very much we fall into every area. You have black males who are skaters. You have black men who work in the restaurant industry, who are blue collar, who are white collar. We're everywhere. What are some of your thoughts around that?
Well, I come from a recovery background, and so I tend to believe, and I know this wholeheartedly, that it's an inside job, right? And so when we talk about the blue faces and we talk about all these different celebrities, we're talking about a character what's been portrayed to the whole world, but that's not who. That's not what Blueface Mama call him. Right, Blueface get called. There's a character behind. There's a
Mhm.
person behind the character. Charleston White talks about it, about assassinating the character and getting to the actual person. Uh, you know, the original Tomcat, which is Nipsey Hussle, right? His real name is Ennis, and who was Ennis, right? But the world would
An
portray him
incredible,
as this.
an incredible Los Angeles black man who lifted up all these youth and people, including me, around this city.
Right. And so it's all how a person perceiving him, right? And it's multifaceted. It's like there's so many different ways he's going to be received. But unfortunately, we can't, for some reason, get over this hurdle. Why do we have to talk about certain things to be famous? And why do we have to talk? Why do we have to talk about violence before we get noticed? Why do we have to talk about these disparities and glorify criminality to actually be noticed and be seen? And so they kind of like sacrifice themselves to this world that says we want to only see you under this lens, but we can't see the real Ennis. We can't see the real Blueface. We can only see you as this. So that once again, we have the systematic change. And if you think about Hollywood, you think about the Hollywood stick, right? The illusions behind Hollywood,
Yes.
the smoke and mirrors of Hollywood. The
That's
Hollywood
the
stick,
industry,
that's
literally,
the
in
industry.
storytelling.
So it's the character that we celebrate. It's not the actual
Wow.
individual. And so
Okay, well,
there's
let me
two
pause you for a
different.
second because that this is it's giving church, it's giving gospel truth, and this is really important. We have black men who are real men beneath these facades,
Come on.
beneath these characters that are being played. And look at the way that Pac's mom revolutionized our understanding of who he was post his death. We loved Pac because, he was a cultural icon, but Afeni spent the rest of her life making sure that she taught us who
He was.
Amaru was. You know, like
Yes.
she needed to give us the. I just got chills in my entire body. You know, and I think about Chris in the same way. I think about Chris Brown. I went through my early part. I used to get on shows and write articles, and I would be so upset about how he showed up. But rarely do we think about who is the Chris underneath the tattoos.
Come
You
on.
know, who is the who's not the blue face, like, you know, who
Right.
is the child that is their heart is there. Black men, a lot of times people think that we're just these hard um dudes. Like, we are regular people. We have spirits, we have souls, and we're beautiful human beings,
Right.
and people reduce us
Right.
to our characters.
So let's think about the black man that can't run as fast as Michael Johnson. Let's think about the black man that doesn't dunk the ball like Shaq. Let's think about the black man that doesn't rap or have the jewelry like Blueface. Is he considered a man? And when you do get those positions, what do you do with them? I can only assume, because I'm not in that actual place, but I can only assume, dealing with some affluent families, that they're not accepted when they actually say they made it, right? Because you've moved to an area that nobody looks like you. You've moved to an area that they paid
Wow.
good money to red tape you out of. And now that you've made it, you've only been celebrated not as who you are, but what you have portrayed. And once you step away from what you portrayed, you're less likely to make the same kind of money that you normally make. So we are trapped even in our endorsement of these characters. We're trapped in all areas of our life, and it's only for us to come as a conglomerate to realize that we are more than just these characters. We are more than just these entertainers. We're more than these athletes. We are more than just that, right? We are actually the raisin in the sun. We are actually the rose that grew out of the concrete. And so it's when we put these two things together and get to healing inside, how it feels to go to a grocery store that you're the only one that looks like you look like, and people clutching their purse, and all these different factors that happen as at the black experience, right?
And
Being
it is
in profession,
universal. It doesn't matter. Like, people, they clutch their person around me. I'm like, I'm the least threatening person. Now I know I'm tall. You know, I like, I'm buff. I'm black. But it is a universal experience that we have in this skin and in these bodies. And you're talking about something that we deal with every day. This isn't a once a
right,
year kind of
right,
thing.
right,
It is every day as Black
right,
men. And having to live with that and unpack it
right,
constantly. Why
right,
wouldn't you want to use drugs? Why wouldn't you want to drink alcohol? Why wouldn't you, get to a place where, I'm about to pop off and end up in jail. Like,
right.
there are so many levels to that, and I want to move in a second because you're getting us into this next and final phase. But I want to be clear that from the streets to Hollywood, the lack of cultural safety for Black men in treatment is glaring. Whether you're in South LA or Malibu rehab, there are systemic gaps that we deal with, and that's where we need to go next. Now we've talked about Los Angeles, we've talked about what it means to be Black and male here, and now when you have brothers, uncles, fathers, people that you love that now need to get treatment, where do we go? Because
Right.
it's ironic. Both of us work in treatment. Golden Global does a lot of concierge services. We've worked in situations where we counsel people literally in organizations. But I want to talk about what's happening when Black men do decide to go into treatment. How are we being treated? And is that related to any of these forms of oppression, or things that we've talked about how the media sees us or what we experience in jails and prisons?
Well, we've already kind of did the framework of how we're perceived, and then the daily kind of uh, uh, situations that one may face it with just in life by itself. But the solution is creating, having talking points. So that's why when you said to do this, I jumped for the opportunity, is because we need to have a talking point. We need to have more platforms for an individual like myself that looks alike, aligned with me, to actually go right. Oftentimes, if I can't see myself, then I don't have nothing to actually exemplify. Right. And we talked about the dysfunction in the family, single parent families, right? The single parent families where, there wasn't possibly a dad in the house. Right. And so, you know, treatment is designed to work on the inside, but when you get out of treatment, the elephant in the room in the treatment world is, what do you do once they leave treatment? You just leave them on their own accord and say, "Hey, I'll see you at a meeting," or do you have executive coaches, concierge service that kind of helps a person aid themselves and help reimagine themselves in what they ought to be, or what they seek to be, right? And so,
It is
like,
hard though. This is what's hard is we see black men leave treatment all the time. Let's say they go and they get detoxed, which is where you go through maybe a couple weeks of state restabilizing your body, getting the drugs out of your system, but then they go back to the same environments and the same stressors, and they're leaving, and where are we sending them for support?
right, right.
What are the
30,
options?
I've been living like this for 15 years. And you telling me that 180 days, 200 days is enough to change and reposture my whole way of living? We've addressed one singular thing. We haven't addressed the lifestyle, right? And so I may have new coping skills, but if you pluck me out of a situation and then plant me back in the same soil that I came from, I'm more than likely to return to the same characteristics. And so, and that's where is kind of daunting, just in treatment and dealing with people as a whole. We often
Well,
say,
let me
like,
ask
you
you
want to,
something about that. Let me ask you something about that. What happens in treatment that leads to that? Like, um, I did a talk for the National Addiction Association a couple of years back, and it was about how black men and black women in particular have the lowest completion rates of all demographics in substance use treatment in America. It means we go into treatment, but for some reason, we either don't complete it or there's a high level of recidivism. That is not a black problem. You're not going to convince me that there's something that's inherently different about black men than every other race that would lead them to come back. So it makes me think, what's happening systemically, what's happening in treatment settings that's not feeding into or meeting the needs of black men, black women, so that when they do leave treatment, they're just as likely to stay out as everybody else.
well, I mean, I think that's a more complex answer, right? I think
I know.
cultural competencies and cultural humility is one of that needs to be flourished within the industry. I think we need to identify some of the things that we were talking about today, identifying some of the traumas that a person that's coming out of being incarcerated may have gone through. No, more than likely has gone through, where segregation and some of the politics that are attached coming into treatment. Just because they come to a different facility doesn't mean they leave with the same, have left that same mindset. And so, if I don't have no representation there, I'm forced into the same thing to isolate, because
Boom.
my thought process is that I'm in danger, right? And I have nobody to represent my kind of uh, uh, where I come from. And so I
Your issues to understand you.
right.
it's so on. So
So you have to see yourself. You have to be able to see yourself. So I think it's important for from all different walks of life that our community, some of the things we were on the fringes of talking about before. I think the community revolution and progress, building legions of organized development, the Brown Berets. I think they had a great philosophy of helping our own, but helping the community as a large, right? And so our community helping our own community, right? And so I think that's kind of what happens when somebody comes into treatment, right? Especially when
let me ask you this. Is it when you say our own community helping our own community, do we need more Black therapists, Black substance use counselors? Do we need to have treatment facilities that have African art on the wall that you can walk in and that you see a picture of NWA on the
right,
wall? You know, like I wonder what is it that how do we help? I mean, we literally do this, but clearly we need more in Los Angeles. We need more support for Black men who are using
right,
substances.
right. And that's why I love to do the organization, going to organization, to talk to the community at a large, from somebody that comes from the community, to somebody that's had his own struggles, so they can see themselves through me. If I can make a detachment from the old processes, then you can do the same, right? And so that's kind of each one teach one kind of modality. And so, I think conversations like we're doing today, we're stimulating today, is just a new wave of, these are hard pressed conversations. A lot of people don't want to have these conversations.
They're very
They do
difficult.
not want
Yeah, because you might
to,
get canceled.
right? But this is something that's really concerning. And if we're actually looking for a safe space, what does that look like? And what is the individual coming in here experiencing? And so, yes, I do think we need to be very intentional about what we're putting on the walls, who we are putting in position. If it's being lopsided, is there being a place where it's equally yoked, right? Where people can see themselves when they come in. I think one of the daunting things for me going into being new into recovery was that, like, you go into a recovery house and you don't see anybody that's Black, right? And that's it's
Scary. No, it's scary. And I'm just gonna say it's scary.
right,
Like race is central to Black
right,
identity. You know, like it's something that is we can't even be divorced from. And so when you go into spaces and you don't see anybody in there who looks like
right.
you're automatically going to assume that's an unsafe
Well,
space.
the conversations are quite different, right? From Ivy League schools to San Pedro, there's a totally different realm, a totally different bottom, a totally different experience. And so what we do is we negate those different locations and get to the actual feelings. And that's what we try to do in treatment, is to tap into the suffering that is going on inside, the struggles that are going on inside, and kind of detached. But it is a little warming for somebody new in experience, just coming out of these environments like prison, to kind of see somebody that they can relate to and that they kind of feel a little more safe with.
And it's not the answer, is the other thing, because I have seen facilities, you know, like there's an old, the ancestors would say, you know, all skin folk and kinfolk, you know. So I don't think that that is the ultimate answer, because ultimately we're all spirits. You know, we're all having this human
Right,
experience. And you're right. If we can connect to the souls of people, to the stories, to the real identities of who they are, then we're more likely to be able to do some
right,
healing that is helpful. It's getting them in the door, it's keeping them there, and it's helping them to progress. You know, I think, Justin, one of the things that I've seen you do as a light in the community. I remember I was in the office and you called me in the middle of the day and you said, I'm walking back and I just ran into this guy who has been on the streets for weeks, who is separated from his family. And you know, most people would walk past him. These are the people that people love to drive past, and oh, I'm not going to give them money. They need to get a job. And you took a moment to listen to this man. And he said, I just prayed to God that today would be my, I just got chills, would be my last day using. I think he was using meth. And he didn't even know that you were a substance use counselor. But the fact that you took it upon yourself to make a phone call, and within less than an hour, that man was in an Uber going into a detox center. We had talked to his mother. Um, this is us.
Yeah.
These are our people. You know,
Right.
like these, when we look at them the same way that we see, we talk about Blueface and we talk about, you know, Crips and Bloods and um, needing to get to the person underneath that are people who are unhoused in Los Angeles. They need us.
Yes.
And they're not just these, you know, random people who are out on the streets. Like these are real human beings.
Yes, man. We're in the business of people. We connect with people. Period. I don't understand anything else. I always tell people when I do a group, God is my boss. This is my employer. I'm recovering from a hopeless state of mind, and I'm a counselor, right? And the very bottom of that is I'm a counselor, right? At the very bottom, I'm employed, but God is my boss. So if God is my boss and if God is everything, then that means I have to act as such. This is not like a stage performance. This is what we really do. You know what I mean? And what people are often, I'm glad you mentioned it. I got chills as well because I remember you brought me back to the very moment, and that unification with his mom and her kind of lack of education on the process, and what a beautiful moment. But this is what we do. This is what we do. We don't turn a blind eye to that, right? And it's being a member in the fellowship is that's my basic, that's my right, that's my obligation as being a person that in recovery and has recovered from a hopeless state of mind, from the allergy and an obsession. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do, is to give back. And that's how I stay sober, and that's how I flourish spiritually. Yes, finances are great, but at the end of the day, I went to a funeral recently, and I realized as my stepbrother laid in that casket, that we don't even take our bodies when we leave. He laid in the casket, but he was not there. So what that lets me know is that there's a greater purpose, a greater calling to this whole thing. People are so
Yeah.
distracted about gangs and color and all. But listen, we don't even take our bodies. It doesn't even matter at the end of the day. He laid there, but he wasn't present. And so I realized that, like, that's the kind of work,
Wow.
spiritual dollars I'm trying to get. Right. That's the kind of spirituality means more than just raising your hands at a sermon. Spirituality is working the principles of that have been laid down for us: honesty, open-minded, willingness, humility. Those are the kind of principles I want to live by today. You know.
And like we say at Golden Global, you know, it's the ability to connect with people through their spirits and to not just see them as their skin color, their gender, the tattoos that are on their bodies or the stories that are created for them. I think for a lot of people watching this, and they will think, this has been a great discussion about some of the issues with Black men. How does that apply to me? You know, something that you said that's important is that we need culturally affirming support in our community, in the treatment setting. We need people to be trained in cultural humility. In healthcare, for a long time, the thing that what people have been learning is cultural competence, but that really teaches you sort of these stereotypical ideas about who people are. But as no matter what our race or our gender or our background are, we need to recognize that the concerns of Black men is a microcosm of
Come
every
on.
group of
Come on.
people that exist trying to get healed. And so when one community heals, we all benefit. This is what Malcolm X was talking
Right.
about. We need to be able to have these conversations about our indigenous brothers and sisters, about the LGBTQ people who use substances, about people coming out of jails and prisons, about people who are executives. We need to be able to replicate this conversation. And so I'm so grateful for you. I'm thankful for the work that you do. We need to be more like you and be the change that we need in this community. And I just thank you for sharing your life and your spirit with people who are the most vulnerable in our society. And on behalf of Black men, thank you, because there's not a lot of people who will look out for us like that. And every single one of you guys counts.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Okay, guys. So that's it. Blessings onto you. Blessings onto me. That was a really beautiful moment, and my spirit is completely full. Um, Thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be focusing on mental health and Black men in Los Angeles with Bruce McDaniel. Until then, be healed. Oh,